The May 10, 2018 meeting of the Williamsburg City Council will come to order. Mr. Trivett, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Zane.
Here.
Here. Mayor Fryland.
Here.
Vice Mayor Foster.
Here.
Here.
First item on today's agenda are the council minutes from the April meetings. Do we have any additions, corrections?
I move that council meetings of April 12th be accepted.
Second.
Mr. Trivett?
Mr. Zane.
Aye.
Mr. Pons.
Aye.
Mayor Friley.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster.
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey.
Aye.
Next item on the agenda is a matter of special privilege, and this being May, which is Bike Month, we have a presentation of a proclamation by Linda Coppinger of Bike Walk Williamsburg. The first proclamation bike ride took place in 1999 in conjunction with the 300th anniversary of the city of Williamsburg, and Ms. Coppinger was the organizer of this year's ride. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. I am here on behalf of Bike Walk Williamsburg. On Friday, we organized almost a posse, as you might say, of 14 riders, and we went to Richmond and picked up the proclamation. It's the governor's proclamation, which was delivered to us by Delegate Bagby, who represents Circuit 9, and 27 miles of the Capitol Trail goes through his district of Charles City County, part of Henrico, and part of Richmond. The certificate of recognition, of course, is for Bike Walk Williamsburg, which is statewide. However, we feel a special kinship to this particular proclamation, as it was, in fact, this ride established in 1999 to celebrate Williamsburg's birthday. And we're hopeful that this will help us get to that gold medal that we're after for cycling. And we're very, very pleased to be able to present this to the city.
So come get it. Thought you might want to.
You are the city.
You are the city.
All on behalf of the city and my fellow members of City Council. This takes us to our public hearings, the first of which is a request of Mohammed Bawe for a special use permit to operate Magic Touch Auto Detailing at 1455 and 1457 Richmond Road. Ms. Burke?
Good afternoon. Mohammed Bawaya is requesting a special use permit to operate a Magic Touch Auto Detailing business at 1455 and 1457 Richmond Road. The applicant is leasing 2 of the 4 units in this building and is proposing to conduct auto detailing, both interior and exterior, installation of window tinting, retail sales, installation of car accessories, printing and installation of signs and graphics, which requires a special use permit. These 2 units will contain office and storage space for the business, and the applicant's statement was enclosed in your package. This property is designated as corridor commercial in the 2013 comprehensive plan, which notes this category designates land on the city's heavily traveled entrance corridors for commercial and service uses primarily oriented to the automobile. The properties to the north and south and west were designated as corridor commercial, and the property to the east is in York County and is designated as general business and multifamily residential. This property is zoned corridor business B2, and the district established to provide locations on heavily traveled collector and arterial highways for those commercial and service uses primarily oriented to the automobile. This district is applied along those streets primarily used to access local shopping areas and providing locations for existing and future hotels, restaurants, and other tourism-related uses. The applicant appeared before the Architectural Review Board on February 13th and received approval for a modification to a rear garage door. The Site Plan Review Committee reviewed this conceptual site plan on March 14th, 2018. At the meeting, the applicant stated that all car washing would take place inside the building, or would take place off-site, and any detailing would take place inside the building. The area designated as Bay on the floor plan is the area that would be used. The Site Plan Review Committee recommended approval for the use and the preliminary site plan layout, including the parking. The applicant proposes to operate the auto detailing business in the single bay as shown on the floor plan and the building layout. This is the only area where work may be performed on the automobiles. He has stated that all exterior washing will take place off-site, and there will not be installation of tires or mounting of rims at this location. The applicant will also provide stickers and graphics, retail sales of auto accessories, window tinting, pinstriping as part of his business. The applicant provided the floor plan reflecting the existing and proposed uses. According to the square footage calculations, there is adequate parking on site. The Planning Commission held a public hearing at their April 18th meeting, and other than the applicant, no one spoke at the hearing. The Planning Commission recommended to City Council by a vote of 6-0 that the special use permit be approved for Magic Touch Auto Detailing located at 1455 and 1457 Richmond Road, in accordance with the conditions that were outlined in my memo. I'm here if you have any questions, and the applicant is also present if you have any questions for him.
Questions from Ms. Burke?
No questions. Thank you.
Oh, go ahead. I do have one question. Can you property line, does it go all the way back to behind the parking spaces?
It does. So the property line where the parking spaces are kind of on a straight line, the property line actually kind of jogs a little bit across those parking spaces, but there's adequate space behind the building to get properly sized parking spaces in that area.
Okay. Thank you. With that, we will open the public hearing. Anybody who'd like to speak on this issue, please come forward, provide your name and address, and if you could keep your remarks to 5 minutes, we'd appreciate that. Seeing no one, close the public hearing, come back to council. Discussion?
I have no issues with the application. I think Planning Commission's recommendation with staff's conditions are reasonable. So that side of Richmond Road is unique because those lots are so small. So uses like this are compatible.
I would agree, and as long as the conditions are met, I'm fine with it, and I think it's good to help a business owner expand his business and have additional opportunities. So I'm in support of it as well.
Concur. I look forward to seeing a new business come to town and be successful, and I wish you both best of luck.
I concur with my colleagues in the fact that the 2013 comprehensive plan is instructive, and as the Vice Mayor has said, it is a compatible use, and I support Planning Commission's recommendation. So.
Ms. Burke, may I ask you a question? Sorry. So the staff recommended that the auto detailing take place inside the building.
Correct.
Can you give us some background as to why?
Certainly. So the zoning ordinance essentially requires those kind of uses to take place inside of an enclosed area. And that's for a number of reasons. The biggest reason is for stormwater, because what the materials that they're either washing off or the materials they're using to clean need to be properly captured and treated, and not just as runoff.
And looking at the site plan, it doesn't appear as though there's much room except for maybe adjacent to the building where there are a few parking spaces, or in the rear where there are parking spaces where that kind of work could take place.
Correct.
So what's the mechanism to enforce that? Is that a codes compliance?
It's essentially codes compliance and staff's responsibility to kind of supervise those areas and ensure that they're being used in the appropriate manner.
And if there were violations that occurred, then that would go through the normal process?
Correct, yes, sir.
Just real quick follow-up. How does codes compliance supervise that? Is that yearly inspection, or is this more based on residents bringing in?
It can be complaint driven, but it can also just be in passing. I mean, we're out fairly frequently, and so we kind of keep our eyes open for things that we know may have been problems in the past, or new things that we just need to kind of keep our eye on to make sure things are operating the way they're supposed to.
Sure. Thank you.
Yeah, so in line with my colleagues, I think this use matches the uses it's right near an auto service facility that's been there for decades, as far as I can recall, and it doesn't seem to in any way detract from the area. So do I have a motion?
Move to approve the special use permit to allow Magic Touch Auto Detailing to locate at 1455 and 1457 Richmond Road, subject to the 4 conditions as recommended by Planning Commission.
Second.
Mr. Trivett?
Aye.
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 Thank you, Ms. Burke. This takes us to our second public hearing, real estate tax increase. Ms. Dameron, is there anything you'd like to say about this?
Just that our current budget calls for a 3-cent increase in the real estate rate, increasing it from 57 cents per hundred to 60 cents. This will generate about $638,000 in revenue, and is basically necessary because our reassessment stayed relatively level. And this will help to fund the increase in the cost for the city of funding the Williamsburg, James City County schools, as well as investments in police and fire.
Okay. Questions for Ms. Dameron? No. With that, we'll open the public hearing. I have 2 speakers cards. The first is Pam Pouchot. Welcome, Ms. Pouchot.
Williamsburg,
If you
where
wouldn't
the
mind,
basis
ma'am,
for...
I'm sorry, just for the record, if you wouldn't mind stating your name and address.
Oh, excuse me, Pam Pouchot, 103 Kimberly Court, Yorktown.
Thank you.
Williamsburg, where the basis for democracy was founded. This is also where democracy is dying. We are taught that there will be no taxation without representation. I do not live in Williamsburg. I cannot vote for anyone on this board. And yet it is this board that has been given the power to determine the sales tax rates for 2 counties it does not represent. Neither Tommy Normant nor Monty Mason have ever taken public credit for this bill. As a participating resident of York County, I can speak with confidence about the York County Board. Our chair had knowledge of SB 942 for months. Not once was the public notified of this pending bill. Not one hearing was held. In fact, not all board members were even privy to this information until the Senate voted on it. After your morning work session with the counties, our board members held a work session in part to discuss this anticipated increased revenue. The York County Board had so many questions about how to implement this bill, what would change, what are our responsibilities, and so forth. Their ignorance was astounding. These were concerns that should have been resolved when the bill was being written. This bill was conceived behind closed doors and reeks of dirty politics. There was no coordination between the governing bodies in the creation of this bill that I'm aware of. Your proposed lodging, meals, and admissions tax increases would be competitive and still be below the tax rates of Virginia Beach, Newport News, and Hampton. They would have charged the tourist instead of imposing a very regressive tax on your citizens. Colonial Williamsburg told its own trustee, Tommy Normant, to fix it, and he did. Colonial Normant has an interest in the Best Western Plus Historic Area Inn. His economic interest will be enhanced by the additional funding for advertising for area hotels. While it may be an orgasmic experience to rake in all the new revenue, I strongly implore you to enact your proposed tax increases nullifying this bill and not impose your wants on York or James City County citizens. In every issue of the Virginia Gazette published since the passing of SB 942 in the Senate, only one comment out of dozens has been in favor of this bill. Delegates Mike Mullen and Brenda Pogge voted against this bill because they listened to their constituents. Please do no less. Historic Triangle citizens, many making minimum wages or not much higher in tourism-related seasonal part-time jobs with no benefits, should not have to fund the advertising bills for billion-dollar corporations such as InBev, Hilton, and Marriott. Do the right thing. Please invalidate this bill. On a side note, SB 942 requires all 3 governing bodies to continue funding the Greater Williamsburg Chamber and Tourism Alliance at no less than the same rate they each did last fiscal year. On their website, they do not even mention York or James City County. But I did notice a member of their board is an attorney with Kaufman and Knowles, Normant's law firm. Normant's SB 942 is telling the boards and council they must fund a private entity, setting a minimum dollar amount when in previous years not 1 penny of funding was required by statute. I do not believe such a requirement is enforced anywhere else in the Commonwealth. Just something else in making the Historic Triangle the highest taxed area in the state. This is not how you attract new businesses to the area. Kill this bill and reinstate your proposed tourism tax increases. It is the only equitable solution to a very regrettable situation filled with crony capitalism. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Pouchot. The next speaker's card I have is Harvey Singer. Welcome, Mr. Singer.
Let's don't start the timer, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Harvey Singer. I live at 698 Counselor's Way. Thank you for your consideration last month. I oppose the real estate tax increase. Take issue with what Ms. Dameron says, that I believe it's not necessary, and to do so involves discussing budget matters. So we go into the next issue. I failed to convince you last time, so I'm going to try again, see if I can persuade you that it's not necessary to raise real estate taxes 3 cents per $100 in order to fund a reasonable budget. You can have anything you want, you just can't have everything you want. From this all funds consolidation in the budget that Mr. Collins and Ms. Dameron put together, take a look at what I've labeled number 1, please. Last year, the year ending June 2017, we spent $50 million in Williamsburg, more than $3,000 for every man, woman, and child. Unfortunately, we took in $50 million, $50.25 million. But number 2, unfortunately, we spent $54.5 million almost, leaving a $4 million deficit. We took that out of our nest egg, number 3. Did we learn? No. We got more money in this year just ending June 30th, 2018. Look at number 4. We're going to take in more than $50.25 million estimated this year. Unfortunately, we haven't stopped spending. Look at number 5. We're spending more than $54.5 million, another $4 million deficit to take out of the nest egg. Number 6, or fund with debt increases. Did we learn? Last month, Mr. Collins, in response to your direction, came back with a budget that looks at spending, number 7, of $55.75 million, more than $1.1 million higher next year than this year. And I went through last time what that $1.1 million consists of, how you get that. Roughly $750,000, $700,000 worth of real estate tax increases, and another $300,000, $400,000 worth of user and fee increases. In addition, that spending that you wanted to do of $55.75 million includes number 8, almost $2 million in debt, interest payments on that debt, or increased debt. That won't get smaller as interest rates rise. Look at number 9. What you also want to do with that money is put a little bit back in the nest egg. $1.1 million back in the nest egg. Remember, $1.1 million comes from $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 worth of real estate tax increases and another $300,000, $400,000 worth of user fees. But that wasn't enough, apparently, because between April and May, there's a package, and your city employees were quite helpful in getting me the information. I'm wondering if any other citizens ever got the package showing changes because it wasn't easy. It's possible, but not easy to find on the city's website. I had to come. I wonder how many other people came to find that. What changes? You've asked for changes, not just $1.1 million more spending to total 55.7, but rather $1.7 million more than that $1.1 million to total $57,466,241, almost $4,000 for every man, woman, child in Williamsburg. How did I get that $57 million? Look on the second page, please. Just on the right-hand side, same way Mr. Collins and Ms. Dameron got the original $55 million, rather. And that is by adding up every fund. $57 million. That's $1.7 million more than you asked for last month. That $1.7 million consists of $350,000 more general fund expenses, more personnel, more police, more administrative spending, and another $1.35 million that you think you'll get from the tourism fund. So $1.7 million and $1.1 million more than we spent this year that's now ending, and more than we spent in last year, when things weren't so bad in Williamsburg. In summary, I contend you don't need the $500,000, $600,000, $700,000 from a 3-cent real estate tax increase. All you need, in order to spend $57.5 million, all you have to do is spend less than the $55 million, $0.7 you originally intended to spend, no more than the $54 million that you spent this year or the $54 million that you spent last year. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Singer. Would anybody else like to address council on the real estate rate increase? Come forward, Dr. Cranbuell.
Good afternoon. I've been not very attentive over the last couple of months. I've been trying to find stuff in the Virginia Gazette, and there's nothing there about the city as far as I consider, just about the county, which is a little disturbing. Maybe our PR people could push them to put more information about what we're doing about our budgets in the Gazette, even though it won't speak. Anyway, we all understand that paper, but it'd be good to have more information. Sure. I'm David Cranbuell, 201 Harrison, sorry. I'm not really up to speed with much, but I don't have a problem with the real estate tax increase. Our real estate taxes are very, very reasonable, and it's the place where we should be raising more revenue. I'm really appalled at the Virginia legislature, our leadership there, because this shift in taxes is going to tax all the people who live in your place, Doug, about a factor of 10 more as a percentage of their income than you or I. That bothers me. Every person working in every restaurant being paid below a wage that many of us think isn't there are going to be taxed a whole lot more. Thank goodness for one person in the county who got the tax removed from groceries, which was really obscene. And so who's funding tourism? The little people, not me. It's a very small percentage of what I spend here is relative to my income. It's terrible. It's disgraceful. It's wrong. Taxing the little people the most to enhance tourism, as was just said. So there's not much we can do about it because it's all in the hands of what was described by the first two speakers of what's going on in this state, which is not much to be proud of in the legislature. So, what do I have to say? I think the real estate tax go up, but this other situation, I guess we're trapped by leaders I don't have much respect for. There's one thing that's very important to me. It was said that this tax increase will be funding police and fire. That's not my top priority. I don't know if it's the top priority in the list that was created all those hours last fall. It's a priority. It's a priority where we have probably one of the best funded police and fire departments in the state, but there's other areas in this city that aren't the best funded. And our downtown is not a place where if you are going to definitely come back because of how attractive it is. As soon as you walk off the Duke of Gloucester and off Colonial Williamsburg property, it's just another town. Some streets are really pretty bad. And so I'm most concerned about is the amount of money that's going to the TDF, this committee that's going to look for proposals, and is going to be used to fund whenever we're going to hear it. We're working on a half year after multiple years of consultants, and I still hear nothing about what I hope will be the most innovative, far-reaching, fully funded plan for renovating and revigorating our downtown. My question is the amount of money in the TDF coming from this tax program the same as it was when we created our own tax program? Is that true, Mr. Collins?
Dr. Cranbill, if you'll address your comments to the council,
Well, to you?
that would be appreciated.
All right. Well, is that true
It's
or
not a question and answer session, sir. This is our time to hear from the
Well,
public.
I know, but if it's not, I have a lot of trouble with what's going on. I guess that's my point, and I didn't get an answer to it here. At least if it is here, it's not in the email that you responded to that I understood. So my point is, I hope it is, and it hasn't been reduced through all of this maneuvering in Richmond. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Cranbill. Mr. Collins, if I may, my understanding is that the amount of money that will be available to the city for tourism infrastructure investment, which was the original purpose of the tax increases that were enacted last year, will be slightly less for the city under Senate Bill 942, but the amount of overall marketing from the three jurisdictions will be significantly greater than is currently available, and there's potentially more money in each of the counties for them to invest in tourism product or tourism infrastructure. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Anybody else wish to address council on the real estate tax increase? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. And I guess that'll take us on to budget adoption. The first of which is ordinance 18-01 to repeal fiscal year 2018 tax increases for tourism. I'm going to hand the gavel over to Mr. Foster on this since I abstained from the vote on the original taxes. I don't think it's appropriate for me to participate in the vote considering the repeal.
All righty. Mr. Collins?
Ordinance 18-01 proposes to repeal ordinances 17-09, 1710, and 1716 that were adopted in fiscal year 18 that increased the city's room and meal taxes as well as established an admissions tax. They were levied to remove the $2 tax, also to provide revenues for a city tourism development fund. The Tourism Development Fund policy continues on. This just repeals those revenues. By repealing these revenues under Senate Bill 942, it sets in effect a clock that within 3 days the city would notify the state Department of Revenue of this action. After that point, 30 days from the effective date of this ordinance, the state law would become law, and the state would start collecting the additional 1% in the three jurisdictions, as well as the $2 tax would be continued in all three jurisdictions. Half of the sales tax revenue and $1 of the $2 tax would be retained by the city and used for our tourism development fund. The other half is remitted to a tourism council for tourism promotion in the three jurisdictions for Greater Williamsburg. Excuse me. The effective date of the proposed ordinance is May 31st. That allows for that 30-day window to coincide with the beginning of the fiscal years of the state and the three jurisdictions. If you have any additional questions, I know this has been discussed at length in the public and leading up to this, so if you have any additional questions, staff is here to assist.
Ramsey?
I have no questions, just some comments that I'll...
Okay, we'll come back to that.
No questions.
Comments?
Well, I think people know that I've been a proponent of the Tourism Development Fund, and today is sort of a momentous day for me. Not only do I celebrate a milestone birthday, but it's also an opportunity for this council to take a bold step towards making transformative outcomes, both for the city of Williamsburg and for the region. 9 months ago, we established a Tourism Development Fund to corral and maintain the integrity of funds for the purpose of tourism, whether that be promoting building product, extending, expanding, enhancing what we have, but also to compete with other markets. And to finance the TDF, we passed the 3 taxes that have been mentioned. But we heard from both merchants and residents that they felt that we should have a regional approach, and that also it should be a balanced approach and not have the burden on one category of merchant, such as restaurants. We also heard that the restaurateurs, and I believe a lot of the retail organizations, merchants also believe that our spending group is about 30% residents, about 30% visitors, and college students and their families. And those aren't only to restaurants, but they're also to clothing stores, drug stores, office supply stores. And the only entity that is really just for visitors is lodging, and lodging was making the biggest contribution to the fund. And since Virginia is a Dillon rule state, which I didn't know what that was until I started here a couple years ago, a regional effort is dependent on the General Assembly passing legislature and having that legislature signed by the governor. Thus, I would like to thank Senator Norman for sponsoring SB 942, recognizing the need for additional monies to support tourism. I'd also like to thank Senator Mason for his bipartisan support and efforts to get this assistant passage. Their resolve demonstrates acknowledgement of the importance of tourism to this area, and also their confidence in the 3 municipalities in taking the monies and spending them to promote this area. And it sets this, it's not perfect, but it sets the stage for the city of Williamsburg, James City County, and York County to have the resources to make substantial changes. And one of the primary reasons we delayed passage of and collection of the taxes was to allow for a regional approach through the legislature. And we were successful with this. And I think that it's important to recognize that not only is marketing of value, but we also need to have funds for product. We only have to look at Busch Gardens and Colonial Williamsburg and the Yorktown Museum and what's going to happen at Jamestown for the 2019 commemoration to realize how important it is to always have new and fresh product to promote and to bring people here. And not only for those who come here, but also for us, because we benefit from any and everything that's done in this city. So I voice my support for repeal of the taxes and feel that it really accomplishes the goals of the TDF discussions that we had last year. It gives a regional approach, and if we don't take that step today, I don't know when that opportunity would present itself in the near future. It allows a mechanism to raise significant funds to really make a difference both in promotion, marketing, and in product. It gives a balanced approach with everyone having some skin in the game, city residents, city tourists, and the counties, and it also creates a level playing field between the city and the counties. So that's my comments.
Hans, you follow that?
Well, those are great comments. Happy birthday, by the way.
Thank you.
I too supported the TDF and was an early proponent of the taxes, and I think the notion of taxing the visitors TDF with the room and meals and admission tax is a smart way to go. But I think here we have an opportunity to raise funds that can be spent in a more impactful way to generate greater results. And the notion that this taxes people that aren't affected by tourism, I think is not sound thinking. Every one of us are impacted by tourism. What we love about this community is supported by tourists visiting us, whether it's Colonial Williamsburg, Water Country, Jamestown, even the stores in this area, Ace Hardware, when I was in the hotel business, I can't tell you how much money I spent there. And so that business is dependent on tourism. And so I think what this new bill has done is it's shared the load, so to speak, so that everybody's participating equitable. And I think that's important. Rarely is there a tax that everybody applauds. And rarely is there a tax that raises revenue that everybody agrees with the purposes in the spending. But I think in this case, both with the 3-cent real estate tax increase and the prescribed reasons we've raised that tax, and then this additional 1% that's coming, makes good sound thinking. We're still competitive in the marketplace. The burden is being shared by all of us, but the rewards will also. I think our goal and the goal that I understand from both James City County and York County are the same. We want a tourism council that is fully functional and laser focused on driving visitors to this market. There's also a commitment among the 3 jurisdictions to work on product. The TDF before put the burden of tourism product investment squarely on the city's shoulders, and I don't think that's equitable. So now we have an opportunity to raise the additional funds so that the 3 jurisdictions can work collaboratively to build new products that will invite people back to Williamsburg that may have decided not to come back because they've already been here and done that. This is a fragile economy. We know that the struggles that Colonial Williamsburg is going through, and it's not going to get any better unless we bring more people to town, more people to buy tickets, more people to stay in hotels, eat in restaurants, and increase spending throughout. I recall the conversations when we approved the High Street development, and the developer then really loved that portion of Richmond Road, because it was centrally located, but because of the tourist traffic, the amount of tourist traffic that went up and down Richmond Road, he felt would be a catalyst for spending in the retail stores there. Well, as tourism has declined, those stores haven't fully developed and they've struggled. We've got to raise the amount of people coming to town, and that is the ultimate goal here. And with that, we create jobs. People who are not making as much money have the opportunity to make more money when the economy gets better, and that's our goal. And we all should, work to participate in that at all income spectrums. So, I support the repeal of these taxes and look forward to, working diligently to make sure that as the 1% comes in and half goes to tourism and half gets spent in the city, that we are responsible and make sure that we hold accountable those funds and the people that manage those funds so that they drive the results that we anticipate that they will. So, thank you.
Mr. Zhang.
Happy birthday, first of all. It's indeed a momentous day. On this council, I was the lone dissenting voice with the original city's Tourism Development Fund. And in doing so, I'd rejected the premise that the largest tax hike that we've had in the city's history was necessarily meeting the ends that we were trying to accomplish. To recap, I had issues with the lack of community input and the lack of jurisdictional stakeholder buy-ins from our local boards, associations, and industry leaders whose industries would have inevitably been impacted by the Tourism Development Fund taxes. And in doing so, I had called for, in casting my opposition vote, called for a more regional solution because the reality is with the city's Tourism Development Fund taxes, we would have burdened our businesses compared to our neighboring jurisdictions. And I thought at the time that it would put us at a disadvantage. Now, someone had made a comment already on this board saying that this provides a equal level playing field, and I agree with that. I think given how the legislative process has gone with the legislature, it's reflected, I guess, a normal way of how bills have proceeded, and obviously I am a little disturbed by the by the lack of community input, but that reflects a personal commitment to transparency. And I think seeing that all the stakeholder buy-in with this legislation being led by Senator Norman and Senator Mason and those in the House of Delegates and the governor with his amendments, I think it proves quite instructive and controlling that we ought to consider the repeal of these tourism development taxes from the cities end, with the opportunity to have that of a more regional solution. Now, that said, in the last couple of weeks, given the mayor's leadership, he has called an emergency meeting with the 3 jurisdictions, and there was a discussion among some of the concerns and about some of the aspects of what direction we're going to move forward. I would have liked a little bit more details going into today's vote, but as we've seen with the city's Tourism Development Fund precedent, that may not necessarily be so. But in speaking with individual representatives from the neighboring jurisdictional boards, the intent seems to be in good faith that they are willing to take a regional approach towards tourism. And I echo the rest of the comments from my colleagues, and I support the repeal of the city's Tourism Development Fund. Thank you.
So I'll echo a couple of these comments. The 2 things moving from last month to now that I was a little apprehensive about was the commitment on the county's part regarding infrastructure. What became apparent at that meeting last week was when this council was getting beat up over that 3-month time span about the Tourism Development Fund, our neighboring jurisdictions were paying attention. They learned through that process for that we need to have a commitment to improving our tourism infrastructure. The sentiment I heard at that meeting was infrastructure investment is going to happen. So I'm confident moving forward with that. Also, my second question was, what does this new marketing organization look like? Party to and part of several conversations on that topic, and I'm confident that that new marketing organization will be what we expect it to be, a truly independent and professional organization run by experts. And I'm very confident that an organization of that design can get results. So my 2 questions have really been resolved, and I really want to take the opportunity to thank James City and York County for their commitment to this broader effort. This doesn't happen by accident. This is messy. This is going to take work to get done, but their overall commitment is. Any other discussion? I'll entertain a motion. Chris, would you like these separate?
I can do it.
I recommend that City Council approve Ordinance 18-01 to repeal City of Williamsburg ordinances 17-09, 17-10, and 1716 adopted August 10th, 2017 and September 14th, 2017, and to amend Chapter 18, Article 7, Section 18-237B of the Williamsburg City Code and provide for an effective date of May 31st, 2018.
Seconded.
Benny Seneca.
And Andrew, thank you.
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Abstain.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
This takes us to adoption of the budget for the fiscal year commencing, you mind if I take this back?
Oh, yeah, since I touched it.
Fiscal year commencing July 1, 2018, proposed resolution 18-02. Ms. Dameron, anything you'd like to add for us today?
I do have some revisions, if you'd like for me to review, that have occurred since the budget was released, the proposed budget on March 23rd. These are also detailed in Exhibit 1 that's in your packet as a part of or as an attachment to the budget resolution. I'd like to start with the general fund and changes in revenues. There's an increase in B-poll taxes in the amount of $142,500 that represents improved performance in the B-poll taxes. As you can see in our April report, which comes up later, we in the current year have exceeded the B-poll budget by $227,525. There's also an increase in the recordation taxes of $59,724. We anticipate that the improvement we're seeing now will continue into next year. And again, in the April financial report, you can see that we have exceeded the current year's budget by $122,000. The increase in meals tax of $158,600 represents results from the new businesses that are either currently open and operational or will be operational early in the next fiscal year. And then as we move to expenditures, the increase in the personnel contingency is just a result of unallocated funds from some of these increases that can be set aside to be used for unanticipated needs related to personnel, or if not needed, would be available to roll into our reserves at the end of the year. The transfer to the EDA of $158,600 is to meet the performance agreement obligations that we have, and note that this isn't funded from the increase in meals tax, and that increase is conservative. And I'll also point out that should the businesses involved not meet their performance agreement, these funds will not be expended. In the Human Resource Department, there's an increase for the employee ombudsman and also for health and wellness, both of $3,000 each. And this restores the funding for those two items to what we have in our current budget. In the Commissioner of Revenue's office, there's an increase for a total of $76,500, and this is for the business auditor, and it includes salary as well as payroll-related taxes and payroll benefits. The increase in the police salaries of $124,724 includes salary as well as payroll-related taxes and employee benefits for the 2 school resource officers. There's also a decrease in the police department for radios in the amount of $2,448. There's also a similar decrease for radios in the fire department in the amount of $4,248. We contract with York County and have an agreement with them for the radios. And earlier in the budget process, they had indicated that there would be a $5 per radio per month increase. Since the initial budget, they have agreed to distribute that increase over the course of 3 years. And so in the upcoming year, there will be a $2 per radio per month increase. And so the decreases there represent the decrease in adjustment in their agreement. And then finally, in the Virginia Peninsula Regional Jail has a reduction in cost for fiscal year 2019 that amounted to $7,209 for the city. This results in a total budget of $34,197,371 for fiscal 2019, a decrease of 4.9% compared to 2018's budget. That is primarily due to the elimination of the lodging tax in the general fund, since it's now part of tourism. Just for comparison, if that was added back, then the decrease would be 1.8%. Moving on to the sales tax fund, there were no changes. The revenue and grants total $5,790,000, with reserves budgeted in the amount of $1,649,883 to fund total expenditures of $7,439,883. In the utility fund, also no changes. The operating budget of $7,312,493 with the capital budget of $390,000 funded from reserves. And that brings us to the tourism fund. In the tourism fund, there's an increase to sales tax in the amount of $1,947,000 to recognize the 1/2 cent sales tax less groceries is enacted by Senate Bill 942. And there's also an increase in the $2 lodging tax in the amount of $1,130,000, also as a result of Senate Bill 942. The 1.5 increase to meals tax is eliminated. That's a decrease of $2,098,000. The 3% increase to room tax is also eliminated, a decrease of $1,980,000. And the admission tax is also eliminated, which amounts to a decrease of $550,000. There's an increase to the transfer to the Tourism Development Fund reserves in the revenue section. And this is simply to move it from being shown or presented in revenues to being presented in expenditures. At our work session, Council had indicated that the format we were using may be slightly confusing. And so in order to do that, it shows up as an increase under revenues of $2,903,473. An increase to expenditures for an occasion for the arts of $25,000. Also an increase for Culture Fix of $75,000. And a decrease in the Tourism Contingency Marketing Fund of $100,000. An increase in the Downtown Vibrancy Implementation of $150,000, and a decrease in the Tourism Development Fund expenditures of the same amount. There's also an increase in the Historic Triangle Marketing Fund to reflect the remittance of $1 of the lodging tax to that fund is required by Senate Bill 942. And that's in the amount of $565,000. There's an increase in the Tourism Development Fund reserves, again, under expenditures to reflect the change in format of where we're showing the transfer to reserves, in the amount of $2,106,973. And I'll just ask you to note that the difference between that and our earlier amount shown as reserves was a decrease of $796,500. And then a decrease in the Williamsburg Area Designation Marketing Committee expenditures of $1,320,000, as they will now be funded from the Historic Triangle Marketing Fund. These changes result in a total budget of $5,282,000 for the Tourism Fund. And then the Public Assistance Fund had no changes, with the total revenues and expenditures of $2,268,015. And the Quarter Path CDA Fund also had no changes. Total special assessments will be collected next year in the amount of $576,479 and passed on to Wells Fargo as provided in the CDA bond documents. All of the proposed changes are reflected in Budget Resolution number 18-2.
Questions from Ms. Dameron?
No questions.
No, but much of what you described is what we've heard, is placing in the staff that we've been talking about. So.
Right.
I didn't have any questions, but I had a comment. Is that later? Is that now?
Feel free.
Well, I didn't want to. Okay.
No, it's
All right.
okay.
Well, thank you, Ms. Dameron, for your presentation. And Mr. Mayor, like I was saying before, I'd like to share a few observations on this year's budget process. First, to start off with to kick off the observations, I am concerned that the city has had to raise taxes and fees in the last 5 years, and With this year, we are confronted with another round of tax increases with the proposed 3-cent increase, along with the anticipated 1% increase to the sales tax that will be affecting our regions. I think this year's budget distinguishes from the last time this body had to raise the property tax by 3 cents. If I can recall, it was in 2013. This year, we have $2.2 million coming in as a result of SB 942. I am disappointed that we had not had a chance to have a discussion about revising our policy with regards to segregating general funds and tourism funds, and instead I had wished that this body had considered the possibility of utilizing some of that half percentage, that $2.2 million, to mitigate the property tax increase, even if by 1 cent. Second, I think spending needs to be constrained, and we have to revisit the idea of how much we've been spending in our levels before we dip too much into our reserves. The city prides itself with being resilient, and we have to protect those reserves to serve that end. In general, how I think about tax increases is that any tax increase merits a heightened scrutiny. I think you had mentioned that phrase in one of our work sessions. It must serve a compelling and legitimate purpose. Like I was saying before with the city's Tourism Development Fund, I didn't think it passed this standard in my thought process. But I will note that I am pleased that there has been progress made on the Tourism Development Fund policy itself. And the possibility with this Regional Tourism Development Fund program excites me, both on how the city can do it and also what we can do regionally. But that said, I think we need to, again, like what I was saying before, we must continue to articulate that specific direction and add details into how we enact our own policies and also regionally as well. That said, I concur with my colleagues on enacting this budget because I believe that there are service needs in public safety and education that are vitally important to fulfilling the city's stated objectives and mission statement. First, I commend the staff for finding approximately $250,000 in savings across departments. That's never an easy thing to do, especially with a lean budget that this city of this size has to consider. But I believe that the new staffing hires, which primarily service public safety and also include educational funding for our Fourth Middle School, in addition to providing 2% pay increase for teacher pay raise, is vitally important, especially at a time when our neighboring jurisdictions, I just noted that Newport News recently had raised their teacher pay raise in their budget adoption, and that's one of the jurisdictions that we recruit and we compete with. It is fitting that we have to continue to ensure that we remain a competitive place for teacher retention. So accordingly, I will be joining my colleagues in approving this year's budget, but I must add that this year's budget ought to serve as a cautionary tale on how we do the people's business with future budget cycles. Any future opportunity with regards to the tourism fund must be measurable, specific, and attainable, consistent with the city's own strategic planning process guidelines. And we need to take a closer look to spending levels leading up to the next budget. I remain open and kindly welcome my colleagues to join in on efforts to tweak the adopted budget throughout the year. And finally, I remain very proud that Williamsburg is a locality with one of the lowest real estate taxes, while at the same time providing excellent core services to our citizens. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any discussion? Go on to more comments. Well, okay, I can't help myself. As I asked on Monday, it's not always about just let's not raise the taxes. It's what are we going to cut out of the budget in order not to raise the taxes? So you can't be against the tax increase but for the budget.
Right.
I mean, you got if you're against the tax increase, then let's talk about what we're going to cut out of the budget. So does anybody have any suggestions?
No.
No, I think it serves a compelling end.
We discussed assessing the financial impact of the 2% raise and the $500 for those under $50,000. Mr. Collins sent out a memo earlier today kind of outlining where we were in number of employees 2009 to 2019 current, and also some background information on the comp and class study. my layperson's read of the comp and class study summary is that merit-based pay increases over an extended period of time result in the compression we just fixed. Is that a correct analysis?
Failure to make those.
Failure to make merit-based.
Any increase to salaries over time. So if you think about it this way, if I hire you at entry pay today and don't give you a raise for 4 years, you become an exceptional employee that knows your job. I hire a new person in. You have to train a person at the same pay rate as you're making who doesn't know the job.
Right.
That's compression. You've compressed salaries.
So in the past, certain people have gotten merit-based raises, certain people have not. The compression occurs on those people who do not get merit-based raises.
In addition,
am I following?
Yeah, if we don't give those raises, somebody who joins us 4 years later may be entering at the new starting salary.
Right.
And so that may put them
with less expertise.
That's right.
So my point is, I understand the reasoning behind a merit-based raise. You want to reward those folks who are doing an excellent job. But are we not contributing to the problem we just fixed by continuing to not give a raise, some sort of raise, across the board as opposed to it based on merit? Like, aren't we just kind of
putting ourselves
resetting the compression problem by not making it a 2% everybody?
So if you just do an increase like that, that's called a cost of living adjustment. And that doesn't actually increase employees in the scale. It increases the scale to adjust for inflation.
Right.
What we're saying here in a merit-based pay increase, if you meet or exceed expectation, if you have learned more about your job in the past year and are more proficient at it, we want to reward you as an employee and move you up in your scale.
And what percentage of our workforce would you say meets or exceeds expectations?
I'd want to give you an exact number. Observationally, nearly all. There are very few personnel issues that we deal with from a performance standpoint.
Okay.
It'd be very few.
But I just want to make sure that we're not contributing to the problem we just fixed by continuing a merit-based raise as opposed to a cost of living raise.
If someone's not performing to warrant the raise and they are compressed, then that's because of their own action as an employee, and others should not be penalized for that.
That answers my question.
So I'm comfortable with the proposed spending that's been outlined in this budget and the tax increase, but I do share some of the sentiments that Councilman Zhang had mentioned. We have to be vigilant. We have to make sure that we are good stewards of the taxpayers' bank. And I think, again, while not everybody will agree, I think we're doing that. We have to continue to make investments because it's like deferred maintenance. If we don't, we're going to have a bigger problem down the road. And I think we've done that for a number of years, and we can't do that this year. And that's, in my mind, the genesis of the Bill 942, the tourism fund and the spending there. So I'm comfortable with where we are, and no, I can't think of any place that I would feel willing to cut. Could I make some cuts? Absolutely, but I don't know that we need to do that this year.
I think this increase really relates back to that discussion we had in June, July, and August around the TDF. The reason your real estate tax rate is as low as it's been, and it's been as low as it has for as long as it has, is because people come here and leave their money and go home. Unless we recharge that engine, this is going to be status quo moving forward. Costs of things go up. We have to reinvigorate that industry. We also need to be diversifying our economy. We shouldn't be a one-note town. A lot of efforts underway to make that happen. The situation we're in is because we haven't performed as we have in the past. And we really need to see some progress in that effort in the next several years.
Well, and to Scott's point about discussions that we had regarding the TDF and funding it last year, there was some suggestions to increase the real estate tax to fund the TDF. And our response was that real estate taxes were meant for core services. And so I think that we have a new school, and education is definitely a core service. And as Paul has pointed out numerous times, we're contractually bound to the amount that we contribute there. School resource officers were not originally included, but we feel it's a very important need to have for the new school. Obviously, public safety with fire and police need our greatest attention, so I'm comfortable. And like the others have said on the pay raise of 2%, if you look at it with a merit-based, if it's for meeting expectations, and if people are not meeting those expectations, then they shouldn't be rewarded for that. And we have a great workforce and staff here in the city, and 2% basically is about the cost of inflation. And we've all seen the price of gasoline go up more than 2% recently. So I'm in favor of the budget as well.
It's also worth pointing out that since the last tax increase, we've made some tough decisions on provision of city services. We went from once-a-week recycling collection to twice a month. We went from twice-a-week trash collection to once a month. A variety of other ways we've tried to cost save on city services. At some point, you can only push that so far before benefit of the value added of living in the city is compromised. So either going to pay for these things or we're going to make the public pay for them on their own. So it's an easy decision for me.
Well, so for as long as I've lived here, it's longer than you've been alive, tourism has subsidized the real estate tax rate.
Right.
It is very low in the city because we've had such a strong tourism economy. We all know how the trend lines are going. That tourism contribution is declining, which means that the difference needs to be made up in the general fund through increases in the real property tax. That is why we first talked about creating a tourism development fund. The idea is that if the tourism development fund does what it's designed to do, it eventually relieves some of that pressure and gets those lines separated again so that we have tourism contributing to the general fund in a much greater degree, and we won't have to do real property tax rate increases. But if we don't get tourism turned around, if it keeps going on the trajectory that it's on, then we're just going to see the property tax rates continue to go up because our obligations are not going down.
Right.
So the idea then of taking the Tourism Development Fund dedicated revenues and putting that into operations undoes the whole purpose behind it and just kicks the can down the lane. And to me, that would be, it might be convenient, it might be easy, but it would be a real mistake. I think the idea is that we invest a little bit more now. We get the tourism infrastructure improved. We have greater tourism product. I'm sorry Dr. Cranfield didn't stay around to talk about downtown vibrancy, but that's a key component of what we're trying to do, to give people reasons to come back to Williamsburg, to give them reasons once they come here to stay longer, and to give them reasons to spend more money while they're here and have a fantastic time. And that's what will help drive our economy to a greater degree and then take the pressure off the real estate tax. As far as what we're spending the money on, an additional police officer, additional firefighter, 2 school resource officers. We do have the business auditor position, which we do believe in time will end up paying for itself if not generating more revenue, but we have to invest something on the front side. And the school expenses have gone up significantly this year. And there's very few better contributions to economic development than education. We have to prepare young people to be successful tomorrow. Otherwise, we're just shooting ourselves in the foot. And as Ms. Ramsey said, we don't have a choice. We're contractually bound because our colleagues in James City County are taking some of their additional revenue and using that to fund the schools. So the one thing I would be prepared to cut out of the budget, and if nobody else agrees, we can just go ahead and vote. Well, first, I'll say one other thing. On the capital side, I'm okay with what we're spending in the coming year on capital. but I'm not okay with where we are in the years after that. All those projects right now are just placeholders. We're not binding ourselves to any of those. But come January, February of 2019, four of us will still be here. We need to take a closer look at that and either push some projects back, take some out, or rethink what we're doing, because that is a place where we're potentially spending too much money.
And that's not a new practice. We've done that throughout history.
So the one thing in the operating budget I'd be prepared to suggest we remove, because in addition to an overall 2% merit pool for the employees, so it's 2% of the entire pay obligation to employees is available for merit increases. We have an additional $500 per employee whose salary is under $50,000. So for some employees at the high end, that's an additional 1%. For employees who are making $25,000, that's another 2%. I don't wish those people any harm. I'm not trying to take anything away from them. I just don't see how we, in good conscience, while we're putting a tax increase on the citizens, give a greater than 2% raise to our wonderful staff. As much as we value them, I just think that's money we shouldn't spend. But that's my opinion. Hearing nobody take me up on that idea.
Yes, I don't know that I feel the same way. I think, it's getting, particularly with the 500, it's getting harder for people in that economic strata just to make, we were all children, and one parent could stay home and just one person worked, and it worked out. But just the cost of living and the requirements to live today are just so much greater. And on folks who make less than $50,000, which are people that I've employed for years, it's just getting harder. And I think in this case, we've got a 9% increase in insurance rates that they have to pick up.
If they have insurance. This also goes to people who didn't opt in on the insurance.
Sure. Maybe that's in this information, but I'm sure it's a lot of them. It's a good insurance policy, and I would hope that they do take advantage of it. And I think it's important that we continue to keep that in the budget.
I do feel like the bad guy suggesting you take an increase out for people at the lower end of the spectrum. But it's the fact that it's in there is why I would be suggesting we take it back.
I would, sorry, Mr. Vice Mayor.
I'm just going to say I support Doug, Councilman Pons, particularly for those in the lower area, and you take $500 and divide that by 12, and what do you got? What's your leftover per month? So I would be in favor of keeping the 2% and the $500 for less than $50,000.
Yes, but for a variety of reasons. But you can probably live on $50,000 and rent a place in the city. But the value of our homes, it's almost impossible to live on $50,000 and own a place. I know a lot of city workers drive from a long ways away to get here. If we were going to cut anything, I would say let's preserve the $500 and figure out something on the top end. But I think $500 should stay.
I would join the mayor with his reasoning. I think given the budget constraints and a lot of the projects that the city is anticipating to execute, I think there might be more revenue or not as businesses come in. We've seen the strength in business revenue coming in, Midtown Roads coming in, and I would suggest that we could hold it off, cut it now, and introduce a budget amendment as we continue to monitor the economic forecast throughout the adopted budget year, if that's necessary. But that's just my personal opinion. But I do recognize the compassion in supporting our city workers, and I would always do whatever it takes to support our city employees. But given this budget situation with the tax increases on our citizens on both the state and local level, and seeing the needs, the pressing needs that we are funding right now, I would join the mayor and concur with his rationale with it.
So if we cut, what is
how
that?
much money are we talking about here?
It's $59,000.
$38,000, I think.
I thought it was
$38,000 for
So
the $500.
that would,
I thought it was 200.
1 cent is $180,000. So if we cut that in order to reduce the real estate tax rate, we're talking about cutting, 30 cents?
It would be just as easy if we're cutting $38,000 for all of council to forego their stipend for the coming year. Says the person who's leaving in July.
I thought you were going to propose that council gets a raise.
Oh, no.
So,
My only point was, we're giving, and this isn't about the particular employees involved. We're giving some staff more than almost a 5% increase in pay. And that's the part that gives me a little bit of discomfort. But it's obviously 3-2. We've got a budget to approve. This is just one point. Unless there's any other discussion, I'm happy to entertain a motion.
I move that council adopt Resolution 18-02, Budget Adoption Fiscal Year 2019.
Second.
Mr. Trivett.
Mr. Zane.
Aye.
Mr. Pons.
Aye.
Mayor Fryling.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster.
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey.
Aye.
This takes us to reports. The first is a monthly financial statement. Mr. Collins, anything you'd like to point out?
Just that we're noticing the business finance revenues recovering a little bit as we enter spring. 2 months does not a trend make, but we're going to keep watching that. That's the kind that we like to watch, and numbers moving in the right direction. And getting closer to end year, feeling a little more comfortable about the budget and its performance. Available if you have any additional questions.
Questions?
No.
Monthly departmental operating reports.
Staff's available if you have any questions.
I don't have any questions.
Mr. Zhang. Okay. Mr. Collins, this takes us to city manager reports, WRHA city MOU agreement. Will that be you or Mr. Wallentish?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, as you remember, we brought this up at the Board of Commissioners meeting on Monday. The two major changes here refer to the clarification on the role of the executive director in relationship to the city. And what is particularly important is while maintaining the reality that the authority is a legal entity, a political subdivision, also it's the way the authority has continued since 2012, 2013. It would not exist were it not for the bailout and assistance of the city for it to survive both programmatically and fiscally, as you already well know. So we've had a really good track record in creating an innovative model, not just in the state but in the country, of a small authority that basically managed to survive with the city assistance as opposed to trying to survive just on HUD funds. And to put it very simply, the amount that the city puts in is equal to or exceeds the amount of HUD funding, just to give you a perspective, plus a lot more on an in-kind basis. So all that it clarifies is that the executive director, and it's a role, as you know, that I've been in, and need to vacate over the long haul because I'm a city human services director as well, and there was some area there that I would create a potential conflict of interest, which is why you need a separate executive director. But that person has to be, and I tell you from personal experience, a very strong link person between the city and the Board of Commissioners. And the reason for that is not just the infusion of monies, but also the individual has to deal with all the departments of the city. And I'll give you an example of what's already contributed. A half-time tenant counselor from Human Services that is not charged to the authority. Finance department and purchasing services that equal 10 to 15 hours a week. IT services, public works services, attorney time, and I can go on and on. So critical wraparound around the authority. And the person that comes in needs to understand that, the language clarifies it, and also that person would be continuing to work collaboratively with me as the Human Services Director on a blended model with other departments, human services and the other departments there. I need to tell you that the city, and much to the compliment of the Board of Commissioners and City Council, we have an innovative program. It's not unprecedented. There are other localities, both in Virginia, albeit few, that have created a similar model, and some of them have looked to us to tell them how we pull that off and how we made that work, since they don't have enough HUD money either. The HUD forecast looks dismal, by the way, and I don't think anyone's going to get more money. There's still reductions being talked about with the capital fund, et cetera. So that's the paragraph on page 4 that clarifies the role and relationship of the executive director with the city manager's office and the other departments in the city. The second major point is the reference to the 2 houses that are owned by the authority at 743 Scotland Street and 210A Strawberry Plains. Again, just to refresh your memory, these are not public housing units. They're houses that were redeveloped, owned by the authority, but the authority owes the city money that it borrowed for those houses. And the language here clarifies the fact that City Public Works will assist the authority and its staff in maintaining these properties, while also the city will continue to collect the rents and assist in the maintenance of those properties. That's basically putting that in a nutshell as well. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
We've discussed this at our Redevelopment Housing Authority Board meeting on Monday. Any questions or comments?
No.
Very straightforward.
Move that the Commission and Council approve the second amended memorandum of understanding between the City of Williamsburg and the Williamsburg Redevelopment and Housing Authority.
Second.
Mr. Trivett?
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. Wallendish.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
This takes us to City Attorney Report, Board of Equalization Resolution.
We're requesting that the City Council adopt proposed resolution, it's not in 18-03. This is to reappoint the existing members of the Board of Equalization whose terms end on June 30 of this year. We have been requesting this by resolution because it makes it simpler. The court is actually the one that makes these appointments, and this is a recommendation to the court, so it makes it simpler in filing those pleadings.
I have no questions.
No questions.
Move we recommend Resolution 1803.
Adopt.
Adopt Resolution 1803.
Second.
Mr. Trivett?
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Unfinished business? Do we have anything to discuss?
No, sir.
New business? Anybody? Oh, it's your birthday. That's what you...
Well, no,
Welcome to
I
50.
was going to say,
That's under old business.
well, that's right, older than probably everyone else here. But we do have sort of a celebration to mark of one of our staff members. Yuri Matsumoto is now Mrs. Yuri Adams, and just wanted to say congratulations to her.
Congratulations.
It's easier to spell.
I've been at 3 meetings this week, and Yuri's been congratulated all 3 times.
Any other new business?
Well, you know how to spell my last
Okay,
name.
this takes us to open forum. Anybody who'd like to address council on any matter, please feel free to come forward, state your name and address. Seeing no one, close the open forum.
Move we adjourn.
No? Do we have?
Oh, we do have a matter of special, not a matter of matter for closed session. Move to go into closed session pursuant to Section 2.2-3711 of the Code of Virginia for the purpose of discussing 1 personnel matter per subparagraph 1 concerning management evaluation, 1 legal matter per subparagraph 8 for the purpose of consultation on specific legal matters requiring the provision of legal advice by counsel concerning VRS.
Second.
Mr. Trivett?
Mr. Zhang?
Aye.
Mr. Pons?
Aye.
Mayor Freiling?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Foster?
Aye.
Ms. Ramsey?
Aye.
Council will take a brief recess and reconvene in closed session.